Alright guys, so right now, today, we're going to be talking about the third civil war of ancient Rome and the Roman Empire, and also how they fell and were no longer the Roman Empire. So starting off, we left off yesterday talking about how Julius Caesar was assassinated by Brutus and a couple of other senators, and that really broke everybody up. So all the assassins, they ran away, fled to the east, seeking refuge. So leadership in Rome fell to two people in particular: Mark Antony on the right, who was a former consul himself and was also a really close friend of Julius Caesar, and then Octavian, who is Caesar's 18-year-old grandnephew, his adopted son, and his heir. So you can guess how he's going to feel knowing that some of Uncle Caesar's closest friends killed him. So these two are going to take it very personally. And then a third guy, Lepidus, who's a general, he's going to join forces. And so the three of them are going to form the second triumvirate. And together, they're going to take over the Roman Empire. They're going to divide it up into three sections. But within 5 years, Lepidus is going to get forced out. And basically, it's just Octavian and Mark Antony. So Mark Antony, and visiting all of the Roman Empire, he's going to develop a certain liking for a Miss Cleopatra in Egypt. And so he's going to start to give away pieces of the Roman territory because he's spending so much time with her. He's not really paying attention to what is going on. Octavian is going to use this as like a betrayal, and he's really going to turn Rome's opinion about Mark Antony in his favor, and he's going to wage war against him. And this is going to be the third civil war. So Octavian is going to beat Mark Antony's army in Actium. So you can see right there on the map. He's not actually going to beat Mark Antony, though. He's not there. He's hanging out with Cleopatra in Egypt. So Octavian beats his army in Actium, and then he's going to go to Egypt, and Mark Antony and Cleopatra are actually going to end up killing themselves, just out of fear, and it's like better for us to do it because at least we know with us it will be quick. So Octavian, after this, was the undisputed leader of the Roman Empire. He was it. Lepidus was forced out. All the assassins that killed Julius Caesar were all dead, and so it's just him. And so we are going to come to know Octavian as Augustus. He's going to take on a lot of different names. He returns to Rome after handling Mark Antony, and he's going to be the savior of the Republic, the restorer of peace, but really not so much, because Rome was a republic up until now. Now it's really not a republic. It's a huge world empire with one man being the absolute ruler. So it's really more like a monarchy, but they're just not going to call it that. He's going to give himself a lot of extra titles, precepts, meaning he's the first citizen, Caesar, heir of a distinguished Roman family, Pontifex Maximus, the head of the Sacred College of Priests. Like, I don't know why he's in charge of sacred priesthood now. That's interesting. But Augustus, meaning revered, and a title of deity. And that's the one that he really likes to go by. And in the New Testament, we refer to him as Caesar Augustus. In Luke 2:1, at the time that Jesus was born, this is what they referred to him as, Caesar Augustus. And so that was around 4 BC. So Caesar Augustus was the ruler of the Roman Empire when Jesus was born. That's a good thing to know. So you might want to write that down. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And he's going to start, after all this fighting, 3 civil wars. That's a lot of fighting to do. He's going to start what's called Pax Romana, and it means Roman peace. And it's a period that's going to be about 200 years long of peace. Now, when we say peace, we mean peace with the outside world. Not necessarily peaceful within, but no more civil wars, not really a lot of invasions and things like that. Doesn't mean that there's not oppression and different things like that. And persecution, that's not what this is referring to. In these 200 years, business and commerce are going to be doing really, really well as law and order. For the most part, they're going to be doing pretty solid. So that's nice. For 200 years, that's a lot of stability, especially when you're talking about times back then. He organized a professional and a permanent army. That's quite the accomplishment. And then he also established an official bureaucracy, and they managed the affairs of the empire. They weren't necessarily the lawmakers, but they were the people that made sure that the budget was balanced, that there was money in the treasury, and things like that. And so that's what they did. But he established an official, legit bureaucracy. He did hope to unify the entire empire by gradually extending citizenship to everyone. And he put Roman law in all courts. If everybody is being judged the same way, he wanted everybody to feel like they were a Roman. Another thing that he did to help unify the Roman Empire was he recruited soldiers from the entire empire. So coast to coast, he was taking them up. He also helped establish building projects for stadiums, special walls of barriers, baths, temples, roads, aqueducts, and a lot of these are still standing to this day. And he sponsored a lot of those building projects. So after he passes away in AD 14, he's going to be succeeded by the Claudian emperors. It's like Claudia, and you just add an N to the end, the Claudian emperors. And they're not going to be in power for too long, but we are going to talk about them because Tiberius, the first Claudian emperor, was Augustus's stepson. And he was a great leader when dealing with foreign affairs, but he really didn't like Rome that much. And when you're the leader of the Roman Empire, it kind of helps if you like Rome. Just saying. It's just a thought. Just throwing that out there. Kind of helps if you like Rome. He was the ruler during the time of Jesus' ministry and also during his death and resurrection. And so that is Tiberius. So Caesar Augustus was the ruler when Jesus was born. Tiberius was at Jesus' death. After Tiberius, his nephew and successor, Caligula, is going to become the new guy. And he's crazy. Now, when we say crazy, we don't mean OCD crazy. We mean he appointed his favorite horse to the Senate. That's nuts. A horse. Like a horse. Okay. So to show how this was not very well accepted by the people, he was later murdered by his own bodyguards. The people that their sole purpose is to protect you, they killed him. So he wasn't very liked, if you can figure that out for yourself, hopefully. And then after that, Caligula's uncle, Claudius, was the new emperor, the new Caesar. He was very well-meaning, but he was really weak. He got the Brits involved. He was mentioned twice in the New Testament. Nothing super fascinating about him. He was poisoned, however, by his niece and his fourth wife. Now, when I say niece and fourth wife, I don't mean they teamed up. I mean they're the same person. Okay, it's Agrippina the younger. Okay, not only was she his niece, she was also his fourth wife. And the reason why she did that is because she wanted her son to become the emperor. And his name was Nero. And that chin beard is just ugly, just saying. But Nero was special. Okay, Caligula was weird. Nominating your horse, that's crazy. Nero was mentally deranged and had zero morality. He had his half-brother, his wife, and his mom put to death. This is the same mom who killed his uncle so that he, and stepdad, I guess? The family relations. This family tree is really weird. But the woman who killed a Caesar to put him on the throne, and he put her to death. You just don't do that to a mama, man. That's messed up. All right. He was going to be the Caesar during Paul, that Paul's going to appeal to for justice that we read about in the book of Acts. That's this guy. So in AD 64, there's this crazy fire that spreads through Rome, and it's devastating to a lot of the Romans. And he was being held responsible for this. Well, what emperor, what king, what monarch would ever take responsibility for doing something wrong? None. So what he's going to do is he's going to blame the Christians. And Nero is going to be the first great persecution of the New Testament church. And this is a good one to know as well. So Nero is the first person to initiate persecutions against the New Testament church. Hundreds of Christians were martyred, including Peter and Paul. We're going to talk more about that in chapter 9. But it's still, I want you guys to hear that a lot. Nero was the first one to start persecuting the new church. But God's judgment is going to eventually prevail on him, and his own bodyguards are going to revolt again. With these emperors, their own bodyguards are turning against him. So his own guards revolted against him and forced him to commit suicide. At least he got to pick which way he went, I guess. Ending the line of the Claudian emperors. And so after the Claudian emperors, we're going to have the Flavian emperors. Not too much to know about this guy. There's not that much. So Rome's going to fall into some political turmoil, as always. There's going to be a time where no less than 4 generals will be fighting each year for control of Rome. And eventually this guy, Vespasian, is going to come out victorious. You don't really need to know him, but you do need to know his sons, because he's going to help restore political and economic stability to Rome, and it's going to last long enough for his 2 sons to be the other Flavian emperors. So the first son is Titus, and this is he's going to be the leader while he's going to capture he's going to capture Jerusalem, just like Jesus prophesied 40 years earlier. So in AD 70, he's going to capture Jerusalem. And he's going to take his dad's throne in that time as well. And during his reign, Mount Vesuvius is going to erupt. So this is mostly where you can see the blast of Mount Vesuvius. It is going to completely destroy and devastate cities like Pompeii and Herculaneum and this place also. So just what was crazy about it is that it happened so fast that people were completely preserved in their natural state, like exactly where they were. You don't really see a lot of people. There wasn't time to evacuate. It just happened so fast. You don't necessarily just die from lava. You also die from just ash. It's really hard to breathe whenever all the oxygen's gone and there's just nothing but ash around you. And so here's just some pictures of what the city looks like now. I mean, it's the entire city of Pompeii was perfectly preserved. And so, you see someone just sitting curled up in a ball, because that's pretty much all you could do. It's not like you could hop in a chopper and get out of there. You were stuck. Okay, and so that was during Titus. His brother, Domitian, is going to take a different approach in being a ruler. He's going to demand that he be worshipped as a god. And so he brought back the Christian persecutions. Even though his dad and his brother didn't really care that much about persecuting the Christians, he did. And the persecution is going to continue to last until he dies. And then we're going to see an end to it. And we're going to talk about this more in chapter 9, how there's 10 great persecutions. He was one of them. Okay, and so after that, after the Claudian emperors, after the Flavian emperors, we're going to get the 5 good emperors, quote unquote good. Doesn't necessarily mean that they were good, that's just what they called themselves. So there were 5, but we're really only going to talk about 3. And one of the reasons why they were called good emperors is because times were good in Rome. During the 5 good emperors is when Rome attained its highest prosperity and power. So there's 5 of them, but we're only going to talk about 3. The first one we're going to talk about is Nerva. He is going to be the last one to give an important revival to the Senate and bring power back and really try to keep that going again. After Nerva is done, it's really not going to be power in the Senate anymore. It's going to be within the army. Another one we're going to talk about is Hadrian. What Hadrian is really known for is building his wall. He's known for Hadrian's Wall. That's pretty much all you need to know about him. And then the next guy that we're going to talk about, the third of the 5 good emperors that you would need to know, is Marcus Aurelius. Okay, now Marcus Aurelius is the guy that is on the right. Now this is a picture from Gladiator, okay? So I know Landon is super excited right now. And he's like, I knew it. I knew he was real. Okay, I'm not saying that Russell Crowe's character is real, but Marcus Aurelius was a real emperor. That is a real part of history. And a lot of times Hollywood will take factual things of history, and then they'll put their artistic spin on it. So this part was real. He was a Stoic philosopher. He was really into meditation, and he also liked to persecute the Christians. All of the emperors, except for Nerva of the Five Good, all persecuted the Christians because Christians refused to accept the divinity that emperors were claiming to have. Christians knew, it's like, I will respect you. I will pray for you. I will not worship you. And emperors really had a hard time with that and did not like it. And that was one of the main reasons why the church was persecuted. Okay, so after we have 200 years of peace, Rome is going to face war, political instability, assassinations, economic disaster. And so with all these crazy things going on, army's going to become supreme. And we're going to come under a time called the barracks emperors. Because, army barracks. So rival generals are going to become emperors from different types of armies. And to help cover the expenses, what they did was they debased coinage and they increased taxes. So the currency became really invaluable. And let me help explain that. Just because you print a bunch of $100 bills does not mean that they have that value. What makes them valuable is that you have something else back in your treasury to back up their value. The more you have of something, the less valuable it is. The more diamonds you have, the less rare and less valuable they are. So just because you have a bunch of Roman coins doesn't mean they're worth anything. And it became so invaluable that Romans actually stopped accepting it as a form of payment for taxes. You could not pay your Roman taxes with Roman currency. You had to pay either with goods like goats and things like that, or currency of a different land. That's saying something. Just saying. So much disorder that cities started to build walls around their borders for protection. Even Rome, big bad Rome, is building borders now. That's a lot of B's. Anyways, so cool. So that was the barracks emperors. They did a fabulous job. We should definitely re-elect them. And so then we're going to get to an era of reform. And the guy on the left, Diocletian, he is going to be the new Caesar, and he's going to decide, you know what, this empire is really, really big. Let's split this in half. And so him and Maximian are going to split the Roman Empire in half, like shown here. Okay, so red is the west, and they're being ruled in Milan, which is in Italy. And then Diocletian is going to take the east, and his capital is going to be in Nicomedia. It's going to change later, but for right now, it's there. And he's going to come up with this great idea he's going to split the responsibility. There's no way that one man can keep an eye on this huge territory. Can you imagine having to go to Italy, then to northern France, then to Spain? It's crazy. And so what he's going to do is each one of them is going to have an assistant and a successor. And that would be called Caesar. And then he's going to divide each empire into 4 areas called prefectures, and each one was run by a prefect. Within each of the 4 prefectures, he split them into dioceses, and each one was ruled by a vicar. And each diocese was split into a province, and it was under the rule of a governor. So there was how we would have nation, then state, then town. It was like that. He also created a new standard for gold and silver. And this is not good because it's going to put them into even more of a depression and food shortages and riots. There were fewer and fewer people paying taxes and more people being supported by taxes. There were more bureaucrats, more soldiers, more welfare recipients, and less people funding it. And so that is going to make it even harder economically. And also, during Diocletian, we are going to see the worst persecution of the early Christian church. So just a couple more slides, so hang in there with me. We're going to enter into an age of grace now. Emperor Galerius is going to issue an edict of tolerance towards Christians in 311 on his deathbed. Thank you for that. But then Constantine is going to make Christianity a legal religion with the Edict of Milan. And this is going to be passed in the year 313. Equal rights for all religions. He restored confiscated property to Christians, and that's just great. Another thing that he did was he moved the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire to Constantinople, which you can see over here where the star is. Now, Constantinople is in modern-day Istanbul, so we're still talking about modern-day Turkey. Just keep that in mind. And this also has another name that we'll use a lot in chapter 10, and it's called Byzantium, because it's not going to be called the Eastern Roman Empire anymore. It's going to be called Byzantine, the Byzantine Empire. And so it helps to think that those two words are synonymous. So keep that in mind. Constantinople, Istanbul, Byzantium, they're all the same place. So keep that in mind. So now let's talk about the fall of Rome. Again, just a couple more slides. We're almost there. Hang in there. So with the fall of Rome, the empire became too large for one man to rule, and in 395 AD, Theodosius is going to permanently divide it into two regions. Now, this is also the guy that ended the Olympics for a while, so boo, we don't like him. Christianity is now the official religion of the Roman Empire. Huge change in just 400 years from outlaw to the only option. So most emperors, the reason why they did this is because a lot of emperors liked the product of Christian morality. Don't steal. Yeah, I like that. I like when that happens. Don't murder. Like that one even better. But they didn't like the theology behind it. They didn't like having to submit their life to Jesus. They wanted the fruit, but not the work. They wanted Christianity just to be fashionable. And so because of that, we're going to see a lot of false converts, and that is one of the reasons why we end up in the Dark Ages, which will be our next unit that we talk about that, and just how Christianity is going to enter a really dark time. A lot of people are going to put a really nasty twist on it, and it's really sad. So Italy is going to be invaded by the Visigoths. Okay, and they are going to conquer Rome in 410, and so they're hanging out, they're with all the Romans and all that stuff. But it's good that they were there, because barbarians are going to invade. It's a group called the Huns, led by Attila the Hun, who is a Germanic tribe. And the reason that, because the Visigoths were there, the Romans and the Visigoths teamed up with their armies, and they were able to beat the Huns in France. So that was a good thing. And then after that, Romulus Augustus is going to be the last Roman emperor. So Romulus Augustus is going to be the last Roman emperor of the Roman Empire. So that's a good name to know. So we're in section 4 now, almost done. Okay, even though Rome had fallen, they left behind an amazing legacy that was equally Greek and Roman, but it had a permanent impact on Western civilization that we still even see to this day. So they had 3 major areas of contribution: the Latin language, Roman law, and a republican form of government. Those 3 things have really shaped the world that we know today. And without the Roman Empire, we would look like a very different place. So let's talk about Latin first. Vernacular is the common speech of Latin. It's the everyday speech. This is not the typical type of language that you would hear from a Caesar or from a great orator like Cicero, which we'll talk about him in a couple slides. This is just what your normal people would speak in the market and the agores and stuff. This is the foundation for most of the Romance languages. Romance languages means French, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian, Spanish. Those are all Romance languages, and all of them take a lot of their words from Latin. So that's one type of Latin. The other type is classical. And this is going to be the language of the churches, schools, and monasteries. This is going to be what the Bible is written in and things like that. So this is medieval Latin. It's spoken and understood by churchmen and scholars around the world. Medieval Latin is going to continue on after the Roman Empire falls. as the language for educated men, all the way up until we get to the Renaissance and the Protestant Reformation. In the 1600s, it's going to be replaced with French. All educated men knew how to read and write French. And then in the 1900s, obviously, it'll become English, and all educated men know how to read and write English. If you want to do business in the world now, you have to know English. Like, that's just how it works. But it was Latin for over 1,000 years. It's still used in legal, scientific, and medical terminology to this day. You want to survive med school? Know Latin. You want to survive law school? Know Latin. Basically, that's just how that works. In the English language, Latin is the source for about half of our words. You can break our words down. The word hypothermia, it's all Latin. You just break it. You just break it apart by piece, and you can know what it means. Up until the 1900s, a person was not considered truly educated unless they could read and write Latin fluently. If you wanted to really have the respect of the world, you had to know Latin. I would say that that's a pretty lasting impact. Okay, so literature. Not too much to talk about. Really, there's one guy you need to know, and his name is Cicero. And he was just a really, really good master of prose. Just a lot of works that he wrote, a lot of letters, philosophical works, a lot of orations, public speaking. He wrote the political theory that basically underlies the entire Roman Republic. So, kind of a big deal. So this guy Cicero was a great writer, great public speaker, so he's a good one to know. But that's really the only one I'm going to talk about. And then Roman law, okay? Rome's most lasting contribution is definitely Roman law, without a doubt. A lot of changes happened between the 12 tables and the reign of Justinian, and you haven't heard Justinian very much just yet. You're going to hear more about him in chapter 10 in this unit, but he's going to be the Byzantine emperor that codifies all of Roman law. Okay, so the 12 tables, which is what we started out with, was very simple. It was very white girl basic, your white mocha latte, okay, very basic. But as the empire grew, there was a legal system that needed to apply to all people that were under Roman law. And so they helped expand on that and make it a little bit more clear, for each situation. And Roman law, their principles were it was the first time that we had ever grasped this concept of just how to apply the law to every citizen. The basis for civil law for many Western European and Latin American cultures came from Rome. So 3 main principles that they had here. You don't need to write these down. It's just good to know. First off, single sovereignty. Laws come from a single source. And that source really is God. Because in America, we are Greco-Roman, but we are also Judeo-Christian. So we take the concepts of Rome, but we apply it in a Christian manner. And we live by the laws of our sovereign God. Universality. Men share a common human nature. If you can accept that fact, you can change the way that you see law. If you accept that we have a sinful nature and men naturally will fall, then you can stop acting like everybody. It's such a shock when people do something wrong. Because, it's human nature. Okay, and then equity. Law should be flexible to fit a large number of cases. Don't be too specific with your law, or you're going to have to write 1,000,000 of them. But if they can fit an umbrella a couple of different cases, that helps minimize how many laws you have to write. And so Justinian Code clarified a millennium of Roman legal developments. And so that is sections 3 and 4. And so we will do chapter 9 next.